right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, we expect people to keep going in. So thank you all for being here. My name is Josh Retka. I live in the Burr Oaks neighborhood across the street from Gopher Resources with my wife and 2 teenage daughters. Like many of you, I received a notice in the mail from the MPCA in July about the situation with Gopher Resources exceeding allowed lead levels. I attended the July 22nd meeting, like many of you did as well, the open house, and like many of you, we didn't get a lot of clear answers. As part of that meeting, we asked the MPCA to come back this evening for an open, public, transparent Q&A session. So we appreciate them being here. We appreciate all of you being here as well. So that's why we're here tonight. We're going to have an open public Q&A session to help you get your questions answered. And we hope that provides a forum for you to get your questions answered. Listen to your neighbors' questions. Hopefully you'll learn a lot from that as well. And with the help of the MPCA, hopefully we'll all be better informed after we leave here. So before I share the plan for the night, I'm going to make it brief so I can hand it off to the MPCA. I do want to share a little bit about a neighborhood group that's organizing around the Gopher Resources issue. There are sign-up sheets you probably saw when you came in. There's a table in the back. So if you want to be on our email list so that we can get more information out to you, if we have future meetings, other information to share, or if you'd like to get involved, we are right now a small but mighty group of about 10, but we need more help, and all of you have ways that you can help us. So if you want to get involved, I think you can mark that on the sheet as well. We would love to have you. We're going to start some level of regular meetings with the group here in the near future. So we'll also be available after the session tonight to answer any questions and help you get involved. So let's see what else I got. So the MPCA tonight would like to start with a short presentation to provide some additional background. So that's first on the agenda, and then we'll get right to the Q&A session after that. And we might have a very short closing right before 8 o'clock or around 8 o'clock. During the Q&A session, we'll have microphones. We have one in the middle of the room. We have this one in my hand to pass around. So please just raise your hand. You can go to the microphone right there. If that's not getting used, we'll pass that one around as well. So our goal is to get as many of your questions answered tonight as possible. So one thing that we might do is ask to keep, we don't mean to cut anyone off, but we might try to keep things moving. So with the MPCA, we'll try to facilitate to get as many questions answered as possible. When you do get the microphone, we just ask that you say your name, where you live, if you're around Gopher, or even if you're just in Eagan and you're impacted in other ways. And you can say how many years, whatever you want to say, but just keep that short as well. And the last thing, finally, we want to ensure that this is a safe and respectful dialogue we have tonight. So I just ask that you keep that in mind throughout the evening. So that's all I have. I'll turn it over to the MPCA to kick off their presentation.
Sweet, thanks Josh. We've got a short presentation for you, but first I want to say thank you for the invitation to come join you again tonight. We brought a load of folks who can hopefully answer your questions as fully as we can at this time. A few things I wanted to talk about with you guys. We'll get this PowerPoint started up, but I want to hit on that kind of respectful thing that Josh just talked about. There's a lot of folks here who want to be able to answer questions as fully as we can and make sure we get to as many people as we can. So there's a few things we'll talk about after the presentation for during the Q&A so that this can be as productive as possible. Also, I've been told we can't get any louder, so also try to keep, if you can, the side chats down, especially for folks in the back. There's another meeting on the other side of that temporary wall, so we want to be respectful to that as well. I think we can switch the slide. First thing I want to share with you all, actually, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Brianna Ellison. I am a manager at the MPCA, and I'm happy to join you guys tonight to facilitate. We have met with David and Josh, and I believe Nick, is that the name? Sorry, I'm bad with names. Before this, and are very much in alignment about wanting to come here and answer questions and provide answers the best we can at this time. So, as you see on the screen, the PCA and the Minnesota Department of Health appreciate the invitation to be in community again. We are here to provide information and answer questions as best we can at this time. Again, we'll touch on kind of keeping a respectful and open and honest space later on in the presentation, but I know folks are antsy and want to get to questions. so I can pass it over to my colleagues to start out the presentation.
Hi everyone, are you hearing me? Okay, very good. Hi, I'm Courtney Allers-Nelson. I'm the director of the Industrial Division, and as we go along, we'll introduce ourselves. There's a few of us that are going to step through a presentation and then answer your questions. If you hadn't seen our previous presentation virtually, or if you hadn't been at the open house a couple weeks ago, I just want to lay a little bit of groundwork. This is why we're here. On the screen, you can see that for the last few months, we have been working to address elevated lead levels that were detected by our ambient air monitoring system. That physical monitor, as you can see on the screen, is basically across the street from Gopher Resource. When we saw those elevated levels, we also took some time to evaluate and saw that those levels weren't just elevated, but they were exceeding national ambient air quality standards. Which is why we've come to community and are here to answer your questions tonight. I want to assure you, though, that the problems that Gopher Resource had at the time have been resolved, and that air quality has returned back to back to as normal as it can be. And with that, we can move on to the next slide. I also want to acknowledge that talking about lead is difficult because naturally there's a contradiction. No level of health of lead is safe. However, facilities in Minnesota and across the country have to abide by the National Ambient Air Quality Standard for lead. So that means that facilities are at a very low level allowed to emit lead. But it is at a standard that is set in order to protect human health and the environment. More specifically, that standard, which is set by the Environmental Protection Agency, takes into account vulnerable populations, including children, and includes a margin of error so that that standard, again, is protective of human health. Lead is in our environment. Lead is in the products we use, and it's something we live with. So eliminating lead is challenging, but it is something that we most certainly control. We can move on to the next slide.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? My name is Amanda Jarrett-Smith. I am the manager of the air assessment section of the PCA. Our section does a variety of things, including operating our air monitoring network that operates around the state. We also have an air laboratory, and we analyze the data that comes out of our monitors. So I'm going to we've been getting a lot of questions, so we wanted to kind of start with trying to answer some of the questions that we've been getting. And some of the questions that we've been getting are a little bit about the history of this site and the history of what it means to be in what's called non-invasive. So I'm just going to, this is some data, and so I'm just going to kind of walk through this image. So on this far side, at the top, that is the ambient air quality standard that EPA set for lead back before 2008. So EPA sets federal standards for various air pollutants, including lead. Courtney talked a little bit about that. They're supposed to set those standards. They review the most current science and set those standards to protect human health, including vulnerable populations. Every few years, the Clean Air Act requires EPA to review those standards, review science that goes into those standards, and see if those standards need to become more strict. So back in 2008, EPA determined that the current science indicated that this standard should become significantly more strict. So that's this lower line down here at the bottom. That's the VIEW ambient air quality standard as of 2008. So the area around Gopher Resource had been meeting the previous standard, as you can see by the green dots there. But when that standard was lowered, the area was no longer meeting that new standard. And so it was designated what we call non-attainment. That just means that it's not attaining those standards, and then certain things happen at that point. Basically, the facility was required to reduce its emissions and its contribution to that non-attainment. And so you can see the blue line, the monitored levels going down over a few years. EPA gives areas a certain amount of time to come into compliance. So that's 2016, that was the deadline for this area to come into compliance with these new standards. So since 2012, the area has been complying with these standards. Up until what we're going to talk about a little bit later, 2025, when we didn't have an exceedance of the standards. Are we taking questions? Or?
I'll just talk loud. We're actually going to hold off on questions until after we're done with the presentation.
If the EPA website right now.
Yep, I understand, sir. We can definitely get to your question
I'm actually
after.
about to address that question.
Yeah, that's actually, Amanda, just real quick, that's part of the reason that we'd like to try to get through the slide, because it might actually answer some questions you have, and then we'll get to the Q&A and be happy to answer your question.
Yeah, that was my next point. The concept of non-attainment and attainment is a very complicated bureaucratic thing. And so what it is basically, back in 2008, the monitoring data showed that the area was not meeting the standard. Once the area is meeting the standard, it doesn't automatically become what we call redesignated, but reclassified as attainment. What is required to do to reclassify the area is a series of analyses, many years of data that is meeting the standard, analysis, permitting, and a bunch of paperwork that our agency has to process and submit to EPA for approval. So we've actually been in that process. Starting in 2015, this area was eligible to begin that process. And so we at the PCA began that process in 2015 with EPA to submit all that paperwork and all that analysis. And we actually did submit that back in 2022. EPA takes a long time to process these things and hadn't acted on that package of materials that we had submitted to them. But now, because they hadn't acted on it, and this area was still classified as non-attainment, even though it was meeting the standards, this area is going to continue to be considered non-attainment for many years to come, because we're going to have to withdraw that packet of information that we submitted to EPA and start all over. And so this area is going to have to demonstrate compliance for 3 full years, and then we can begin that process all over again. So this area, even though it was meeting the standards, it didn't automatically become attainment, because that's a special process that it has to go through, and this area will continue to be considered non-attainment for many years. So, yes, non-attainment, to kind of summarize that, non-attainment is not the same thing as like continued non-compliance. Next slide. So now we're going to talk, that was a little bit of history, now we're going to talk a little bit more about more recent events. So this we already chatted with people a little bit about a few weeks ago at the meeting. But here you can see Gopher Resource is the blue blob there. The yellow dot is the air monitor that we operate. And that monitor is specifically there to monitor that area and determine whether or not that area is meeting the federal air quality standards or not. Then we have the area of focus. And so just to clarify a little bit about what that area of focus is. So we use some modeling to understand any place where lead might have landed from the event in January, February, and March. So that area of focus is not to say that that entire area experienced experienced exceedance levels of lead. The most lead would have fallen out of the air over 500 feet from the facility's fence line, and then the farther away you go, it gets less and less and less. And so that's an area where any amount of lead from the event may have fallen, but that whole area wouldn't have experienced those really elevated levels that we've monitored. Next slide. And just a little bit about the data. This is the data that we can compare to the federal air quality standards. So EPA sets the standards, they tell us how we have to monitor to compare to the standards, they tell us how to process that data, and they tell us how to analyze it to understand whether or not we're meeting the standards or not. So the way that EPA requires us to do that is what we call 3-month rolling average. So that takes the average data from this month and the 2 previous months and averages it together. So you can see that with that analysis, we had exceedances in January, February, and March of this year. And then this compared to the standard, we go back down under that standard after March. Next slide, please. And so this is the day-by-day data. So we collect data every 3 days at the site. These data cannot be directly compared to that standard because the standard is that 3-month rolling average. That's the way that we have to calculate it based on EPA. But this is the day-by-day monitoring that you can see. And so you can see those elevated levels and then that the levels have come back down after that March date. So next slide. Hand it over to Courtney.
Hi folks. Some of the questions that we received when we had our open house or even our virtual meeting or that we received in our inboxes after those events were about what was happening during this time period, what was happening between January and May. And so I'm going to walk through a little bit about what was happening each month. I want you to know though that we are currently in an open civil investigation. You'll see, and I'll talk about it, in May of this year, we issued what is called a notice of violation to Gopher Resource, which is us opening up an investigation into what happened. So what I'm sharing with you today is a summary. It's not specific details, and details are important for us to maintain and to have as we continue to investigate, as we continue to build a case, and, in short, hold Gopher Resource appropriately accountable. Starting in January, it is a requirement of every permitted facility to give us a notice of when there is a release to the environment. This is for water, this is for air, and in some cases, they have to notify us even faster than others if they know that this is going to have an impact on human health. On January 31st, we received what's called a duty officer report from Gopher Resource, and at that time, they report that they have had a piece of equipment malfunction and that they're taking that offline. Then, in February, we started asking questions about what's happening, what is the equipment. Thank you for advancing that slide. And we started asking questions. There was not enough in that duty officer notification for us to fully understand and appreciate what was happening. Gopher Resource explains that they have fixed that equipment failure and that they're putting it back into use. Meanwhile, inside the agency, there is, as you heard, a very detailed and specific process for the way that this monitoring material and then data is compiled. It is our lab scientist who starts to raise concern about the materials that were been collected from our monitor that you've been hearing about, and says these look elevated, these look different than before. This is a good indication, and communication starts inside the agency, that there may be more going on here. So we continue into March to monitor the situation and to investigate, asking Gopher Resources for information. And I would say internally, we started having conversations about how can we speed along the process to analyze that information that we're collecting from the monitor and do something with it. By April, towards the end of the month here, we hear again from Gopher Resource that while there had been an initial equipment malfunction, there was a subsequent issue that they had been dealing with through the months of February and through the month of February. Also during the month of April, we made sure that we have, we've requested a total root cause analysis from Gopher, and we continue to be in contact with them. In May, once they have told us that they have corrected both of these equipment issues, we conduct an inspection and verify that there is no longer an equipment malfunction and that subsequent issue has been fully resolved. At the same time, approximately the same time or shortly thereafter, we have now verified data from inside outside the agency, which means that we can act, and we do, by issuing a notice of violation at the end of the month. It's also about that time, at the end of May, that we start to talk to our partners, the Minnesota Department of Health, the Dakota County Public Health, in order to think about if we have these exceedances, what resources and what information can we be bringing to community. I want to also tell you about, you can advance to the next slide, at the same time that this is all happening, it's important for the community to know that we have also an ongoing open investigation into the way that Gopher Resources manage their stormwater and hazardous waste at the facility. These, at this time, are two separate cases, and they are both open, and therefore there are some things, unfortunately, as I described, that I cannot share with you today, but all of this is taken into consideration as we move forward.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Kendall. I work for the Minnesota Department of Health, and I supervise the Health Risk Intervention Unit, which is our surveillance program. And I just want to pause. There's at least 10 chairs up here, so folks that are standing in the back, if you want to come up and grab a seat, get more comfortable, feel free. There's plenty of space up here. Again, thank you to everyone that has reached out. I tried to answer as many questions as I could that are commonly received questions in this presentation. To just start out, a little bit of background about lead. So in order for lead to affect health, it does have to get into the body, which is what we refer to as exposure, as we'll be using that term throughout the presentation. And then we do also say that no amount of lead in the body is safe. And as Courtney referred to earlier, this feels like a paradox because while there is no safe amount of lead in the body, and small amounts can be harmful, as we'll see when we go through some historic information, we're not starting from a place of having zero lead. Next slide. Okay, so ways that exposure can occur, and especially thinking about the concern about an air release, the two main ways would be either inhalation or ingestion. So either breathing in air that is contaminated or that has higher levels of lead in it, or ingestion. Eating food that was grown in contaminated soil, or touching lead dust, and then putting, kids especially put fingers in their mouths. A common question that we've gotten is whether you can be exposed to lead just by touching it, and the answer is no, it has to actually get inside the body. That generally speaking, lead's not absorbed through the skin, and so it has to actually have another route of exposure. So common sources of lead in Minnesota, the three main ones that we see most commonly are old lead-based paint, either spices or foods that are contaminated with lead, and then jobs or hobbies. Question comes up, how do we know this? So in Minnesota, blood lead test results are reportable. And so when a laboratory does a blood lead test result, we actually send all of those test results to the Minnesota Department of Health. We triage those results, and results for children that are above 3.5 micrograms per deciliter, we share with public health and begin some public health action. For confirmatory results that are above 5 micrograms per deciliter, we will actually send someone out to the home. The Minnesota Department of Health covers the whole state except for City of Minneapolis and Ramsey County, which have their own programs. But then the Minnesota Department of Health covers everywhere else in the state. We will send an inspector to the home. We do a questionnaire to find out more about the individual child's activities, other locations besides the home that they spend time, and then we are collecting a wide variety of samples. We are testing the paint, we're testing dust, we're testing soil, we're testing water, we're testing consumer products, ceramics. There's a variety of things, again, tying back to that questionnaire and how the child interacts with their environment and where they're playing and spending time. So when all of that to say that these are the main sources that we track back to as part of those investigations. As I'm sure everyone here is aware, that another potential source of lead would be lead from industrial facilities, either recent or historic releases. Next slide. And then just a note that all people can be affected by lead, but really we're most concerned about children and pregnant people as being the most vulnerable to the effects of lead. Next slide. So again, kind of getting at this concept of there is no safe level of lead in the body, but lead is also, it's not an all or nothing concept. Practically, unfortunately, it's impossible to eliminate absolutely all sources of lead in our environment, although we are certainly working towards reducing all of the ones that we can. And over time, both Minnesota and the United States have lowered what's considered to be quote-unquote safe levels of lead, and then created stricter standards to reduce those levels down. So public health is now taking action at lower levels than we used to ever in the past. And then the standards for lead in soil, dust, consumer products, air, water, a variety of other media are also stricter than they ever have been in the past. So if you want to go to the next slide, this is what that looks like practically. This particular graph came from the New England Journal of Medicine article. The blue line there is the average blood level in the United States over time. The scale is multiplied by 10 compared to the numbers that I usually use. So don't let the scale kind of fool you if you're looking at the details, but the point being here, then the red is the level that's considered quote unquote safe, realizing then that in 2012 CDC started kind of doing away with that safe level language. But what I want to get at here is that, again, we take lead very seriously, and as agencies and as a society, we have created stricter standards over time, and what used to be considered acceptable levels of lead in the past are no longer considered acceptable, and we're continuing to bring that down and make those levels even more stringent and respond to those levels. Okay, so I've talked about this in the past. If you've heard me speak before, there's a variety of symptoms. If people develop symptoms related to lead that are possible, but most people who have an elevated blood level are not going to have any inherent signs or symptoms. And so especially for kids, this is why we emphasize the importance of doing screening blood lead tests at age 1 and age 2. And then for older kids, they also need an additional blood lead tests because the signs might not be apparent. So we really rely on that routine screening as an important tool in our toolbox. Next slide. So again, blood lead testing, there's a couple of goals with blood lead testing. One is identifying people that need medical treatment. This is really quite rare, and by rare I mean 2 to 3 people in the state per year would fall into this category of needing medical treatment. And so that's, for most people, eliminating the source of lead is the primary action. Blood lead testing is also important for defining when we do those public health interventions, and we do work with families to figure out what their individual lead exposures are and identify and stop those exposures. This could be a variety of things, this can be anything, including the applesauce contamination that happened a couple of years ago for lead. Next slide. Okay, so this is something that has come up a lot in the community, and I just want to start out by saying thank you to those of us who've taken the time to have some conversations with us about your experience with foam lead testing. Prior to the public meetings, MDH was not aware of this happening in the community, and so that's been very helpful for those that have taken the time to share their information with us, and then we've also been doing a lot of research on our own about what is out there on this topic. Unfortunately, the bottom line is that XRF devices are not approved for use on humans, and there are no FDA-approved bone lead tests. So again, unfortunately, neither MDH nor your healthcare provider can offer bone lead testing. And there are not established quote-unquote normal ranges for lead in bones. Again, I know that this is frustrating for a lot of people because bone lead testing is something that it sounds exciting, it sounds interesting, it's something that, hey, I know possibly some of you in this room have received yourselves. Unfortunately, it is not something that we are able to interpret the results from, and it is also not something that can be offered to the community. Okay, so getting into our blood lead data from this community. What we have up on our website right now is the 4-year chunk from 2017 through 2021. But again, knowing there's lots of questions, we wanted to break this down into two maps and be able to show you a little bit more recent data. So I pulled this map first. This is 2014 to 2018. And then the next one will be 2019 to 2023. So that's the most up-to-date data that we can put out there. So what this shows is by census tract, did that census tract have a percentage of kids with an elevated blood level that was different from the state average? So the green color here is no different from the state average. That light beige color is lower blood levels, or a lower percentage of kids with an elevated blood level than the state average. The light blue color is 1 to 2 times higher than the state average, and then the dark blue color would be 3+ times higher than the state average. So in this time frame, 2014 to 2018, there were a couple of census tracts in Eagan that did have higher percentages of kids than the state average with blood levels. I did go back and I reread the reports from the home investigations that were done for kids at this time. And the sources of lead identified in those reports, a lot of them were actually exposure outside the country. So it was exposure that occurred not in the U.S., but the kids were receiving medical care here, like they normally reside here. They received medical care here, and so they were diagnosed as having an elevated blood level here. And then there were a handful of consumer products, and then some lead paint as well. Next slide. And then, like I said, this is the most recent data that we have, which is 2019 to 2023, and the area is not different from the state average in terms of number of kids or percentage of kids with an elevated level. Next slide. Okay, so I know that many of you brought in soil samples for us to screen. This is something that we were able to provide as a community service through either drop-off at the last open house, and then there was also a drop-box for several weeks at Westcott Library. Everyone who dropped off a soil sample received their results individually. We had 164 soil samples that were submitted to us. And the soil screening that was offered, this is considered a community service. This is not a scientific study of the area, and this is not data that we were collecting for regulatory decision making. This is just something that we wanted to make sure that people had answers about their own yards. I know that we're getting pressed for time, and so what I did want to at least put this up on the screen so that folks can see if you're not familiar with the box and whisker plot, really what they're showing, the box and the whisker, or like the top part of the box is 75% of the test results, up to that top part of the box. And so overall, we had more than 95% of the test results were below that EPA garden, threshold for gardens. The only other slide that we have is comparison to Dakota County, another soil shot that was done in Dakota County on the left. We can go back to this if folks have questions on it. And yeah, and then I think we have contact.
Go ahead, talk about it.
Am I assuming this will be available on the website if folks want to look at it, or we can make it available to folks?
If we can put up.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Sorry, the microphone has a delay, so I'm sorry if it sounded like I was yelling at you. We have to turn them off with the battery. So here's how to contact both of our agencies. We have the MPCA's contact information up top, and MDH, or the Minnesota Department of Health, on the bottom here. Thanks for sticking through that with us. We know it's a lot of information, but we thought it was important for folks who maybe didn't make the last meeting to be able to get a baseline understanding of what's been happening, and also to share some new information with folks who were able to come. You can go to the next slide. So before we get into Q&A, one of the things we like to do when we come into the community, especially when we're having open Q&As, is talking about fostering a respectful conversation. And this is something we talked with Josh and Dave and Nick about. So here's kind of some of the shared norms that we talk about in these meetings. One is raising your hand and a microphone can come to you, or as Josh said, going to the end and a microphone will come to you. Another is waiting to be called on by a facilitator to speak, and I promise I will do my best to get around the room and get to everyone's questions. Also speaking one at a time and not interrupting each other. I know that there's a lot of very big and real feelings in here. It's something that people have concerns about, and I want you all to know that I understand that, and I will try my best to get to you and be as respectful to you as possible. I mean, continually being respectful, and ask the same for you to us. That again, avoiding profanity, personal attacks, or name calling. I talked about also interrupting. I do want to just call out, because it happened a few times, the sign is interrupting. So I can't stress enough how disruptive that is to the information we're sharing when we're trying to answer questions. You can continue to do it, David. It's a little bit disappointing, but that's okay. That's okay.
Honesty is respect.
Yeah, and we will be as respectful and honest as we commit to be. So we can only share some things, and I think that's important for us to tell you too, is this is an active and ongoing investigation. There are things that we legally cannot share publicly at this time. So if you guys can trust us in understanding that if we can't answer, it's because we legally cannot share, because it's not public due to that active and ongoing investigation. Last couple things, respect the truth in everyone's perspectives. This is not judging others or criticizing their opinions. This is not just for us, but also, I'm sure there's varying opinions across the room here. And lastly, this is something I'll try to, like I said, move around the room, making space for others who haven't had time to ask questions or share concerns. So with that, I think we are ready to go into questions and answers. We have some hands up, we have some mic runners.
All right, so again, you can come to the mic here, and we will also do our best to get around to everybody. So take it away.
Hi, can you hear me?
Very lightly.
Get a little closer. Hi. All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Well,
Get close to the mic.
You gotta hold it real close.
I am talking into the mic.
Yeah, you gotta do that.
Okay. My name is Jennifer Workman. I am a resident of the Burroughs neighborhood, and I'm also the chairperson of the Eagan and Heights Watershed Management Organization. My concern is about groundwater and surface water in our neighborhood. Can you speak to how air emissions might affect the lakes and ponds within our neighborhood? And also knowing that the city stocks those lakes with fish and goldfish in our lake.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So your question was about how air emissions might affect water quality. Can I pass that to MPCA?
So I would share a little bit of information. Hi, I'm Kirk Kadelka. I'm with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Assistant Commissioner in the Commissioner's office. So as we get to lead, as we're dealing with lead in soil or other pieces, lead is fixed to soil. So it doesn't readily move when it comes in contact with water or that. And so that the concern there is not for movement into water for that, it is about someone touching that soil, and then as mentioned, creating an exposure pathway by putting the fingers in the mouth for the lead. And so that is how lead interacts with the land that it's following.
We can go to the next question.
All right, can you hear me?
There we go.
Thanks. So first off, I just want to thank you for coming here. I'm sure this is not easy, and at times you can feel attacked, but please don't take this as an attack. It's a plea for help. We see the MPCA and the MDH as the only groups that can help answer our questions and make a real impact, so thank you for being here. I wanted to request 3 short-term solutions and get your feedback on these. And these are solutions to help protect ourselves. Those are real-time monitoring, real-time alerts, and more monitors.
Yeah, I'm in.
MPH, Stephanie just said no amount of lead is safe, and yet we learned about 13 separate days of illegal elevated lead levels that were happening between January and March and July. I was gonna say it's 3 months later, but I crossed it off. It's actually from January when we started getting exposed. We didn't hear about it until June or July, 6 to 7 months later. I understand you have to wait for 3 months of data before a violation can be issued to Gopher Resource, but there's no law stopping you from alerting the public. In the last meeting, you cited the Clean Air Act as your reason for not notifying us sooner. A news member of WCCO that's here tonight asked the EPA directly, and they said the Clean Air Act does not prohibit you from sharing data before the 3-month rolling calculation is done. So let's be clear, there's no restriction in how and when you choose to notify the public. Still, I learned at the last open house that it takes 6 weeks to get back your lead results. And I understand you have to continue using that standard method to file the violations. But that being said, there are real-time air monitoring systems out there. There's one company I found called Centroid, and they can return results in 10 minutes and cost $2. I encourage you to look at that website. And third, we also need more monitors. This is the second largest battery recycling plant in the country, and we have 1 monitor. Gopher Resource. Gopher Resource recycles 26 million batteries a year. What if the wind is blowing the other direction, away from the monitor? We have no idea of the amount of lead in the air, and if Gopher Resource wanted to, they could game the system and simply change their production volume based on the direction of the wind. I understand there are rules around issuing violations to Gopher Resource, and that you have to follow a standard approach, but you are not limited in how you monitor and alert the public. Right now, we are receiving alerts 3 months later. That's not useful in protecting ourselves or our children. We need real-time monitoring, real-time alerts, and more monitors.
We appreciate you sharing your story. And I think the question I got out of that was asking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, more up-to-date monitoring, more monitors. Was there a third one?
Yeah, it's real-time monitoring,
Real-time monitoring.
real-time alerts,
Real-time.
timely alerts, and more monitors.
Okay, perfect. That is a PCA question, and we'll pass it to, is it Amanda?
Start with some pieces and then how we work.
Thanks for that question. I remember chatting with you at the last meeting, so I appreciate all the engagement. So let me think about, so in terms of real-time monitors, and actually, you mentioned a specific monitor. Our team did look into that a little bit, and we weren't familiar with that specific monitor, but we are familiar with monitors that are continuous for lead. So I think kind of backing up, the monitor that we have cited there, the purpose of the monitor that we have there is to demonstrate whether or not the area is complying with those federal standards. So in order to do that, as you said, we have to use the federal process for processing that lead. And that is an inherently slow and cumbersome process. Continuous monitoring does exist. It's not EPA approved. So we, as a regulatory agency, are very limited in what we could do with that data. It could certainly, a monitor could exist and that data could be made available by us or by the facility or a local government or a community group. Because our purpose there is with that regulatory aspect, we can't really use it in that way. So there's a variety of options there, I guess I would say. And then in terms of continuous monitoring and adding more monitors, we operate a network of over 50 monitoring sites around the state. Each of those monitoring sites has specific resources of staffing and costs that go along with it. And that monitoring network is approved by EPA, and each of those sites has an individual purpose. And so we have resources to operate that existing monitoring network. And we're a government, we're in a resource constrained environment. So we don't have, to be frank, we don't have additional resources of staff or monitoring equipment to add monitors. So if we were to add additional monitors, that would require some new resources in order to do that. And then I think about real time, and then I want to talk a little bit. Pardon, yes, there are many parts. Again, as a regulatory agency, we want to be very careful. I think this is something that Courtney can speak to a little bit more than I can, but we need to be very careful about the data that we release. We need to make sure that that data is something that we can stand behind in a court of law. And so when we are releasing data, we want to make sure that it has been very thoroughly reviewed, it's gone through the proper processes, and that we can stand behind that because our process has stood that up. So,
but we can never use that to protect ourselves, right? If it's coming 5 weeks later, we've already been exposed. So it's not it's useful for violations against the company, but it's not useful for us to do anything.
Yeah, and I think that's an inherent challenge here, and I really hear that, and I'm interested in continuing to engage in this conversation. And the fact is that our monitors are for this purpose, and they're kind of designed that way. So I'm interested in continuing that conversation. I really hear that concern, and the monitoring that we do for regulatory purposes is never really going to be able to meet that concern. So interested in continuing that conversation. So I appreciate it. Courtney, do you want to add that?
Sorry, just one thing on that. I'm assuming there would be nothing stopping Gopher Resources from funding additional monitoring, notifying the public. So I guess this would be an ask. If anyone works for Gopher Resources here, or if they don't, this is a public cry to please be transparent with us. Give us real-time monitoring. Give us more, because the regulatory agency maybe can't, but you can. So Gopher Resources.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
To add to that, I don't want to belabor this, but Gopher does operate 2 regulatory quality monitors at their site. One is located right next to ours, and one is at the north end of the facility. We as an agency, we can't use their data because we don't certify it, but they do operate 2 monitors at their site as well.
Which they don't share any of that data with the public. So
Oh, Courtney has something to like.
Sir, I'm going to also follow up. As I'm listening to the conversation, I think there's something else that I want to add. So we're clear that the monitoring that we do right now is to evaluate against the standards, which is different than what we hear community asking for. And certainly there are, thank you, Josh, there are other options, whether it be outside of the MPCA and some other form of government wanting to ask for continuous monitoring or Gopher themselves doing that. I think I do want to stress, though, that It is a rare thing to have these lead NAC exceedances. And as soon as we, and I mentioned this in the timeline that I shared, had some indication, we didn't have the data, we had our lab scientists flagging that something is not right here, that we did move more quickly. And Amanda could describe this even more thoroughly, but the way that we report to EPA is to take 1 quarter's worth of data, and then we go through that process, and then we really wouldn't have the data available until June or July, the end of June.
No, I get that, but it's just still, you can see from our side, it's not useful. We can't do anything with that.
I agree, and so I think there's also agreement
Yeah.
that we have 2 different purposes that we're looking to achieve.
And that's,
So thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for that question. Go ahead. Really close.
I
might be muted.
I moved into the townhouse that I live in right now, October 31st of last year. I have 2 daughters that are disabled. They have an autoimmune disorder called PANS, which is pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome. Basically, there's different triggers that can cause inflammation in the brain for them. And now after this, lead has been identified as a trigger for my younger daughter who has this. It's likely a trigger for my older daughter as well. Between January until the beginning of May, the end of January until the beginning of May, my daughters got influenza in January, which started a flare for them. Because of the influenza, I had the windows open in my home on the days where it was like 10 times the legal amount of lead in the air. I had my daughters walking outside because it's important for people with hands to get sunlight. Otherwise, what builds up in their brain is the same as what Alzheimer's and dementia people have in their brain. So when they were already in a flare, they were outside in that air, less than half a mile from Gopher Resources, and they had the longest flare of their lives, both of them. My second daughter went to the hospital multiple times, had to go in an ambulance 2 times because it was not safe for me to bring her. The second time, her school had to go in a lockdown because the other children were not safe. And our doctors had no idea why the flare went on for so long, because usually the treatments work within about a month. I was contacting members of Congress in Minnesota. I was trying to read the state that there are no providers for PANS in the state. And I was not understanding what was happening because it never happened like that before. So I would like to know what is going to be done for the people that have autoimmune disorders or other diseases where they can't have even that EPA or whatever regulation exposure. They can die from these flares. I wasn't even planning on moving there. The place that I moved to fell through, so I didn't have time to research the way I usually do. But I gave up. I haven't been able to work full-time since June of 2023 because of the disability. I gave up everything to move them to that home because my older daughter is mobility impaired, and we can't afford a place big enough for a patient to live. So I lived for myself when she's 100 pounds. I sold my car, I cashed in my 401k to get to this place that their doctors are saying we cannot stay at, we have to move. So now my mom, who should be getting ready for retirement, is cashing in her 401k to get us to move. So it's not relevant for us anymore because we are leaving, but I would like to know what is going to be done for people who can't be exposed to these things, because I looked and tried to find what I've been missing, and there is nothing from the city of Eagan talking about Gopher Resources exposing you to lead, and I'm looking back to 2015, it says exposures are from the water, which I get my water tested regularly. It can be from the roads, which we try to stay away from all of the busy roads that we can, and it can be from lead paint, and I specifically looked for a townhome that had fully been remodeled so that there was no lead paint. I even went into the lease and double checked that there was no lead paint. So there needs to be more transparency and education for that, because Pan's parents, Pan's caregivers, there's been a study that it's consistent or comparable to caring for someone with dementia. We are on the last of our last, and we don't have any resources already. There's as many as 1 in 50 kids that have PANS. It's been determined that it's 1 in 200. So this isn't a once in a while thing that's going to come up. So I'm terrified for the future kids that have PANS that might live there. And I would like to know what is going to be done to save them.
I just want to say thank you for sharing your story with us, and I'm sorry to hear about the health of your children. It's definitely a really heavy story, and I'm sure it's heavy for you too. So the question you had, though, just to reiterate, is what can be done as far as information sharing and making information more publicly available about the risks? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, community, just knowledge. There's nothing out there that's talking about how Gopher Resources emits these things until July. I've gone to total reports on the times, and there's a few things up until about 2015. I see nothing for the last 10 years showing me.
Thank you. Figuring out today.
Appreciate that. In terms of historical data, one of the things we're trying to do is get that out with the webpage, as you mentioned, is up recently. We have our data that goes on, historic data, as mentioned earlier by the gentleman, that it's not real-time data, but we do have that on our available. We're making that more easily available, and there's a direct link now to our website, so you can see our historical data, including when we upload our new data from our monitoring network. That includes breakdowns on lead and other items. So it is our attempt to try to get that information more readily available, but acknowledge it is difficult. What's in your neighborhood is the site that is meant to help folks. I put an address, and you can see other facilities around it. But it is a lot of data. It is hard for someone to do the research, but we are trying to make some of those improvements.
Hi, my name's Steve Roth. Back in '92, I built my house. Unfortunately, I'm the closest house to the stack, 900 feet. When we moved in, there was a study already done, soil samples. We were not told about it, just disclosed or nothing. The readings were 4,400 was the highest. That's 400 feet from my property. And I wasn't told. I'm gonna fast forward it. 5 years ago, I'm mowing the yard, and here's a bobcat in the woods behind me. He's removing soil. And I asked him what he's doing. He's removing soil because of the lead, heavy lead that was in there. And they were gonna bring 6 inches back in. And I called the city of Eagan, I called the MPCA. Supposedly you guys didn't know nothing about it. The reason why they were removing that soil was because that parts, the place, company there now wanted to expand. Well, who told them that they had to clean up the lead before they had to expand? Somebody did. So one of you guys ain't telling the truth, I guess. But I asked for the whole community to get soil samples. They only agreed to do the houses on the tree line there. They didn't notify nobody. You guys didn't notify nobody that it was going on or nothing. I've been there 33 years and I've seen so many violations. And how did you respond to that? Did you get a hold of the residents? You didn't, never. On the past violations, you have never gotten back to the residents at all. This last one. The last violation, I found out from Channel 5 News, and I'm the closest house. And I got the flyer 2 days later. We got 4 houses in a row that have cancer. I just had chemo today, sir. And I want to just tell you, I had to leave work 10 years early. The first sign of it was working at work. I felt like bugs in my head, crawling around. Went to the doctor. He said it was all in the nerves. And it progressed to multiple myeloma. Had a stem cell transplant, and I've had chemo for 10 years now, every month. And I'm just totally upset. I don't want no more fixing because I've heard it all. Year after year, there's violations. I got pictures right here. I sent you guys probably over 2 months ago. The white powder that's on the tracks, 400 or 500 pounds of it underneath the railroad cars. I called Dan Leach, he runs a Gopher. He said it was talcum powder. It's not dangerous. Talcum powder is very dangerous for kids to get into it. That's how Johnson & Johnson had all their lawsuits. It's still sitting there today. I told you guys 2 months ago about it. There's pictures of it today. As far as that, sorry, I'm not good at talking, but I shake like crazy and everything, but the monitoring system you have, I walked over there and took a picture. You can unplug that from the fence. You want to pass this around? Pass this around. You can unplug this. Any person can walk by and unplug that. Does that make sense? How about the soccer field? Summer days, kids are playing soccer. Which way does the wind blow on summer days? From the south.
Who else is going to get built? Right there.
It's going right to the kids.
There's clearly an impact on the community's health. I think one of the questions that we should just get out here right away, the MPCA has the ability to revoke Gopher's permits, correct? So how much more do you have to hear before?
We can all stand up and say something.
He's my neighbor. He built in '92. He's gone through cancer too, skin cancer.
So when is it going to be the community over Gopher Resources? That's one of the questions.
I got a list of all my health problems. There's 30 health problems here. I'm going to show
I want
them.
to just first say, I hear folks talking about the health problems that they're facing, and again,
It's every one of us.
yeah, and I want to say, I'm sorry about that, and I appreciate you sharing your stories, and I don't doubt that you all have stories you could share with us, and that's part of the reason we're here. I can't answer the question that was posed here, so I will pass it over to one of my illustrious colleagues that can better answer that question.
Still on there. The picture they got of the extension cord, you can just unplug it on the fence. I mean, that's a whole monitoring system.
So, do you know when it's unplugged?
We have two questions here. We'll first answer the one about enforcement, and as people asked about shutting Gopher down, and then we can get to your question about if we know if it's unplugged for sure.
Hi again, folks, it's Courtney. Thank you very much. I know you're sharing very personal stories, and it is certainly moving, and I appreciate your candor.
Well, I've seen it time and time again where it's gonna be fixed. It's not gonna be fixed. When something can't be fixed, you get rid of it. This photo right there, I gave you, it shows the green smoke coming out of it today. That's today.
Today?
Yes.
They're all today?
Pardon?
They're all today?
Yes. All those pictures are from today.
Oh, well, guys, our monitors
Just real quick, there's, in order for us to be able to answer the question, we gotta just take a breath and let us answer. We can definitely continue on this conversation.
So I'm going to address revocation. I think I mentioned already that we initiated our investigation officially by notifying Gopher Resources that we were issuing the notice of violation here in May. Our investigation continues, and what that looks like is that there are certain requirements and things that we are asking of them right now, and that is protected data. I'm not sharing those details with you today. And part of that is because, as Amanda mentioned, unfortunately, this can very easily become a legal and litigated thing. And so I want to keep some things private so that I can use that and have every legal lever that I can possibly pull. It's kind of like when the police are doing an investigation to a serious crime, right? They don't tell you all those details because they need it in order to build a case. So there are things, unfortunately, I'm not telling you today, and this is where I ask for your trust.
I did have a bone test result 2 days ago also. It's very high.
Thank you for sharing.
They are accurate.
Yeah. Go ahead, Courtney.
So as we continue our investigation, what we do as an agency is we follow a process. After gathering details and information, asking Gopher Resources to do very specific things, we take that all into account and evaluate all the tools that are available to us. And revocation is a tool that's available to us, but I want to stress that is an extremely rare thing that we don't take lightly. I think Amanda alluded to this earlier. In the state of Minnesota, of course, we are here, we're protecting your health. That's why we have the standards. That's why we do our jobs. There are also requirements that I have to make sure that I am holding businesses accountable, and I'm also considering the impacts to them. That is part of the requirements for the state agency to operate. Not only do we take your health into consideration, but we also take economic impacts into consideration. That all is evaluated before we determine which tool to proceed with. I also want to stress that revocation is spelled out specifically in Minnesota state rule, and so there are certain requirements that Gopher would have to meet. Again, meeting them and proving that they have met them is an extremely difficult, rare thing that the agency takes on, but it is one of the tools we can consider over time. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Kirk to talk about the soil.
So there was questions about soil. I'd like to talk to you a little bit more too about some of that earlier sampling, and hopefully folks can hear me. But I do want to talk about the 2020 work there on the Eagan office and warehouse facility there. That was something that they were looking for, like you mentioned, an expansion. They do go through our brownfield program. They did sampling in that area. That area is an old farm dump where there have been lead battery casings found. And so that is why they did the sampling there, and for them to move forward, they needed to remove soil that exceeded the values at that time. That was done through an oversight of the MPCA, our brownfields program, and we share more information if you'd like on that. So that was done by a third party, voluntary party of that warehouse / office building to move forward on that work. In addition, at that same time, MPCA had Gopher do sampling around a number of residents' backyards that bordered that area to determine whether or not there was lead that had gone beyond their property there. And the results at the time were below the screening values, the soil reference values that were set for lead. So that work was required of Gopher to do that.
Just real quick, there was another question that I wanted us to get to. It's about the monitors, and if we would know if they were unplugged.
The short answer to that is yes. We have a monitor technician that goes out to our monitor every 3 days. And then we also have mechanisms on the monitors where we know if the power is out at the monitor. So yes, we would know.
Thank you.
One more thing. My granddaughter's 15 years old. She lives with us. She does an inhaler and nebulizer, very bad asthma. And my grandchild, he's 5 years old. He doesn't live with us, but he plays with it. Epilepsy, seizures. All that's a sign of lead. You have to shut this place down. It's no place to have it in a residential area. What are you thinking? I mean, they're planning on a whole townhomes and everything. It doesn't make sense. We're gonna be over there letting everyone know what's going on. We're not gonna let people build if they gotta be notified. How dangerous, it's dangerous. Every day I'm compromised by that place.
Thank you for sharing.
All right, next question.
Can you hear me? I want to apologize if the MPCA felt disrespected by my sign, but I felt personally disrespected because it feels as if we're telling you that there's a fire, and you're telling us that fire doesn't exist. I grew up half a mile away from Gopher Resource. I've struggled with skin cancer since 6th grade. My sister and I both have learning disabilities. It feels as if this is all just trying to be downplayed when we're not testing for arsenic or any of the other known contaminants from Gopher Resource. We're trying to minimize these high levels of lead that they're repeatedly exposing us to based on permit violations that Mr. Boak up there wrote. There was one instance, one permit violation I should say, where they lost the ability to control their lead emissions 10 times over the span of 2 years. That's not even a part of this conversation right now.
How'd they notify us?
They weren't notified.
Exactly.
So it just feels as if we're being disrespected. And to answer the question of, is the MPCA able to shut this down? I have the specific language right here, Minnesota Statute 116.11, subdivision 1. If there is imminent and substantial danger to the health and welfare of people of the state as a result of the pollution of air, land, or water, the commissioner may, by emergency order, direct the immediate discontinuance or abatement of pollution without notice, without a hearing, or at the request of the commissioner. The Attorney General may bring an action, blah, blah, blah. Commissioner may exercise the authority under paragraph B when the commissioner has the evidence of any of the following. So we have the evidence. We have our bone tests. We have lead in the soil. We have found arsenic in our soil. And the amount of people that I've talked to who have cancer in this neighborhood is astounding. So we demand you take this seriously. We're under the impression that there's no safe way to burn 50,000 car batteries in a residential area a day.
Yes, right.
And we want to know if we can actually do something about that.
Yeah.
So my question is, are you going to use your power to shut this place down?
Thanks, David. Before I pass it over to someone who's smarter than I am and can answer that question, I just want to acknowledge and thank you for your apology, and just also acknowledge that that's coming from your frustration, and I'm sorry you feel disrespected. Again, thank you for the invitation to come here and answer your questions. I think the frustration in this room is real, and I think we're open to hearing your stories, and I think it's important for us to hear them. So thank you for coming tonight and sharing your stories and asking your questions. I'll pass it over to, it looks like Cory.
I want to say, I'm very familiar with that statute, and that's because the agency itself put forward modifications to that language to strengthen it so that when we believe we need to, we can use that. And we just did that in the 2024 legislative session. And so I myself was contributed to that. And so I take that very seriously, and I know exactly what it says. That is a very weighty, difficult decision, and not one that we would even necessarily make alone. And I want to acknowledge that my partners here at the Minnesota Department of Health had several slides that also talked very much about and compared this community to other parts of Minnesota. And so that data is also extremely compelling and something that we would take into consideration. That's not to say that I don't understand or empathize with the things that you are sharing here, because they're certainly serious, and I can feel how much they are impacting each one of you. I feel that. But that statute is honestly for emergency situations. And as I said before, all options are on the table. As I said before, all options are on the table. We are early. Unfortunately, these investigations do not happen quickly. And I would say this one is especially thorough because we have been working with the Environmental Protection Agency to further evaluate the things that we are asking and getting from Gopher Resource. So we are taking all options extremely seriously. Thank you for acknowledging that we have that option available to us. And I care very much about it.
Can we add the fires? Would that be emergency?
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
The fires that happen at the plant, can those be part of it?
Can we, sorry, I'm so sorry, there's a lot of talking. Can we get that in one question?
I don't want to interrupt, but part of.
You guys are okay, it's totally okay.
The fires that they've had there was a fire 2 years ago on the roof, and there's been other fires.
Yeah.
Would that be an emergency?
Yeah, the question, I'll repeat it. They're asking, there's a fire, did you say it was on the roof? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, in the last few years, there's been a fire or multiple fires, and they're asking if that would constitute an emergency and qualify for that statute that David shared.
So I can talk a little bit about the fire that was responded to by the local fire departments, along with other agencies. We were a support agency in that. Part of that work that was being done at that time, there was some air monitoring that's done in large fires at that point by the local units of folks as the fire was going on. Long term, after the incident is over and the fire is responded to, the agency is more in the lead there of then asking for data and sampling. And so we have and had required data and sampling to be done in investigation. And as alluded to earlier, those stormwater and hazardous waste violations stem from those fires that we're looking into at this point and doing the investigation. And because it is an open investigation at this point, it is not public data under state law. But because of that fire, we do have those open enforcement cases, and that will be brought into along with the air pieces here as we look at the totality of it all and applying it to the statute that Courtney talked about. We do have a very specific process that we need to go to, and it is very regimented, and it has to meet those thresholds, and we have to prove that case as mentioned. And there are allowances under federal and state law for violations to, if they occur, the agencies work to stop them and corrections made in, but just because there's a violation does not mean, though, that is enough to trigger the closure of the facility.
I just want to say I've got a 3.5-month-old daughter that just left. She's disrupted. Oh, there she is. There's a lot of people here with kids, and the longer this takes, the more our kids are poisoned. So we want this to hurry up.
Exactly.
What's the time frame for closing this investigation?
I actually want to just ask Josh, there's a lot of questions popping up, and I would look to you about whether you want to go from the line or if you want to do the ones that pop up. Totally up to you.
One thing I would just ask, I know a lot of you have many questions, just as we can keep it as brief as we can. We've only got about 40 minutes left, so just ask, be respectful of others that have questions, so thank you.
Hello, my name is Laura, and I did want to mention in terms of shutting the plant down that you mentioned that education is a very rare thing. But earlier in response to one of our questions, you also said that it's a rare thing to have the exceedance of the lead going. So it feels like there's a rare thing that maybe should happen, but also a rare thing that has happened that maybe should cause the other rare thing. But my actual question is that I understand that you guys are more of a governing body, and obviously the hammer of bureaucracy is very, very slow to wind up and actually hit. And I assume that the reason there are violations that are issued is so that the public that's around these plants can be safe, and so that things that are in violation are eventually shut down or changed so that people are safe. And in the same breath, the Department of Health, if kids test with a high level of lead, someone is sent out to their living situation to see what that is, because it's expected that that's a very dangerous situation and we want to stop it as much as possible, specifically to limit the exposure and to stop that exposure if at all possible. And so my question is that if this exposure event happens and there's this high level of lead right next to our neighborhood, right next to the park where people play and kids come in for t-ball, how are we supposed to be safe if we are not notified that there is this potential issue that maybe we want to keep our kids indoors or wear a mask or whatever, or get our blood tested? Because if we don't get that information until almost 7 months after the fact, is a blood test even going to show anything? Is there anything we can do? How can we be safe if these violations are only being reported to us so many months after the fact?
So just to clarify the question, it is how can the state, whether it's the Department of Health or PCA, be quicker to notify community?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we want to pass that to PCA? Health?
Sorry if I had it before. I think as we're going through this investigation, these conversations are very helpful to hear what is wanted and then into our compliance enforcement mechanism with the company, whatever corrective actions need to be done, because that can help inform those pieces. The very specific asks on monitoring, and that, made some updates here, understand that there's a request for more real time, and I think that's something that we will have a conversation too as we collect here, not only through the enforcement action, but if there are other avenues available, whether it's if we need additional resources or that, we'll have that conversation to see what may be able to move forward in that regard. That is something that will take, unfortunately, as mentioned, a little longer time for us to have those results from the compliance and enforcement pieces and additional corrective actions, or if we need to see additional funding from the legislature. That is something that, unfortunately, is not a fast move.
Yeah, just one other piece that I wanted to ask from the health perspective is that when we're talking about exposures to lead, one of the things that is really important to understand is magnitude and frequency and duration of exposures to lead. So in this case, we are talking about exceedances that occurred of those national ambient air quality standards. That's something that my colleagues over here at MPCA take very seriously, and that's why they are going down this pathway of violations. That is something, though, that from a magnitude perspective of the amount of lead in the air, it was what was released from those data, as we understand them, was also still below what the NACs had been in the past, which was at the time considered to be an allowable level that people could have breathed day in and day out, and not expected to have elevated blood levels. And so the point here being that going out and doing lead testing for a exposure that is of a shorter frequency, duration, or magnitude is unlikely to actually result in elevated blood lead levels even at that time. And if we do identify those elevated blood lead levels, if we start that public health response, and we're going out, we're doing investigations, we're, like we said, we're in those homes trying to understand what all the potential exposures are. Our goal there is to identify and stop that lead exposure. And so in this case, it's actually the air monitors that's a more sensitive tool for us to be able to identify lead exposure and have MPCA take the reins on stopping those exposures versus trying to look one step removed at the lead data. At the same time, if exposures are occurring at higher magnitudes, more frequency, and over long durations, that's when we start to see them show up in that blood lead data, that we're then able to have those public health responses or see those areas where we do have higher rates of elevated blood lead levels. And then I know we're pressed for time, but for example, one of the things that we did do, I mentioned earlier the maps back in the 2014-2018 area. We had a couple of census tracts in Dakota County that did have higher levels. We actually did quite a bit of engagement with doctors' offices in the area and understanding that a lot of those elevated test results were coming from exposure outside the country and from consumer products. We did a lot of outreach with the health clinics at the time and patient education and really trying to get those messages out there.
Great, thank you.
Blood lead is short-term exposure. You have to measure the bones if you want the real picture.
It looks like we have another question, and I'd look to the organizers of the meeting to decide if we bounce here or if we go to the line. Totally up to you. I understand. I don't want to snuff anyone, but
what is the half-life of lead in the blood system? We're being told, what I've read is 28 days. If we're not being notified for 3 to 6 months, when you go to test, there's no lead there.
And actually, people may choose to go get tested on their own. They may choose to do that, but if you're not letting us know within those 28 days, you're taking that choice away from the community. And you're no longer protecting the community.
And their data isn't valid because we're not getting tested in time.
Communication is protection. You're equipping the community with knowledge to be able to care for ourselves and our families. But if we're not being told in a timely manner, there's no option.
Yeah.
We're in the dark.
yeah, I understand the frustration with the timing of notification from the PCA here. I'm wondering, we had someone touch on some testing stuff with lead and half-life and how that goes. I'm wondering if MDH has any.
I'm wondering if we just keep it going to the line here. Okay, we've covered most of those already, and I apologize, I know this is emotional, but we want to get to the rest of the questions. And then
We
people are asking.
completely defer to you.
And we'd ask you to ask folks after, we'd ask you to email the MPCA additional questions on those.
We'll put our contact information up at the end here too for folks to write down and tell you how to contact us. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Ben Mason. To be very brief, I think the gentleman mentioned there's a couple of locations near Gopher Hills where there's a lot of kids that congregate and play. I'm curious if you have any data or testing around specifically Thresher Fields or Beautiful Shepherd, the school. It's just maybe a quarter mile down the road as well. You've got like thousands of kids that are at those locations every day, and some of them probably are eating dirt. To the earlier, comments about eating dirt. There's lots of kids that are playing soccer and probably eating dirt at that field. So I'd love to know any testing that's been done or assurances you can offer for those two locations.
Thank you. Question, is that something that?
So I don't know what city is here. I know the Pressure Field, the ballpark, and there was another location that they were doing soil sampling. The results are not in yet. But that is information that is, the city is working to get. I'm gonna try to find the email here on the 3 locations, and I will update you here in just a second. But I want to go to the next question.
Yeah. I also believe that might be posted on the city's website. I hate to talk for them, but I think I had seen something that they have a Gopher Resources page with that information that Kirk had shared. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody, my name is John Clevin. I've been a Borough resident with my family for 25 years. We've got a lot of experience in the field. What's really concerning to me, a couple of things is we keep hearing this talk about blaming on the EPA and the EPA timeline. Okay, those are minimums. The state of Minnesota can pass legislation and push us to have much stricter guidelines. And I would actually ask that you do that to protect other citizens in Minnesota around the state as well. I'm very concerned with this, what I'll call antiquated methodology of sampling and getting results out. Pulling air over a filter media, sending it off to a lab, taking 6 weeks. I asked why it took 6 weeks when I know from experience you can push that through in a half a day and you get your results. I was told because we only have one person working in our lab. That's pathetic. That's a pathetic cop-out, okay? The state of Minnesota just lost $1 billion somewhere, okay? I look at this process and how long it takes. Whether or not we've been asking to shut it down, that's in reality probably not going to happen. But in this day and age, there's technology, so we should not have to be waiting here as residents for 6 weeks to just even get a result. Somebody it was brought up that Gopher has a similar sampling device on their property, so they're not getting results for 6 weeks either? This is ridiculous. There is continuous emissions monitoring equipment that can be placed on that stack, will give real-time data, and shut that process down as soon as it goes into exceedance.
Right.
Okay? This is ridiculous. All of us sitting here, all the comments tonight have all been, well, how are we going to find out? It's going to take us this much time. It's exposing our families. Why don't we stop exposing our families? Maybe they have one, I don't know. Do they have a scrubber? There's scrubber technology that can be put on that stack. We'll just end emitting lead over this neighborhood, right? Because I don't care if lead's in your blood, it's out of your blood. We all know lead does not go away. So if it's in our yards, every time there's an exceedance, there's more lead piling up in our yards, piling up in our bodies. So I'm asking the state, please step up. Please try to drive Gopher to be a good corporate citizen.
Sorry, I should have just waited a little bit longer. Thank you for sharing. Before we go to this next question, we do have the city of Eagan here that can talk a little bit about their soil testing at Thresher Park.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sarah Horwath. I'm the Director of Communications and Engagement with the City of Eagan. Just to answer that specific soil testing question, we do have soil testing being done on Thresher Dog, Off-Leash Dog Park, Thresher Fields, and Burr Oaks Park. Unfortunately, we had hoped to have those results back by today. We don't have those results. As soon as we have them, though, we'll post them to our website. We'll also post them on social media, so please look for those results.
Next question.
All right, so I have here a letter from the MPCA to the CEO of Gopher Resource. It's dated for December 2nd, 2024. And it cites violations that happened from 2020 to 2023. It includes 17 separate incidents where lead filtering technology malfunctioned or wasn't working properly. This was news to me. I'm sure it's news to everyone else in the neighborhood. Many of those incidents did not include corresponding lead measurements, which I've requested, but 4 of the incidents included lead levels. Those range from 3 times to 24 times the legal level. And the real kicker of all this, there was 17 infractions over 3 years, and the penalty from MPCA to Gopher Resource was $11,950. Wow. Which is completely meaningless to a company like that. It's actually a green light to continue violating in the future. This form was signed by Cory Bach, who's sitting up here, and he, it's my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but has overseen the current negotiations regarding the incidents that happened in January through March. So my first question is, was the public notified May 11, 2021, when the lead levels were 24 times the legal limits?
No.
And when were they notified?
No.
No.
My second question, how could 17 illegal violations over 3 years result in such a meaningless fine? And my third question, how can we trust that Cory Bach and MPCA will hold Gopher Resource accountable this time and then give them a penalty that actually makes an impact?
Okay, so, excuse me. The first question was about the violations
The
that occurred.
incidents, yeah.
The incidents that occurred, when was it, 2021?
May 11, 2021.
Okay,
Where
we'll
it
start
was
there.
24 times the legal limits.
Okay.
A trailer collapsed, I believe.
Correct. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So in that instance, they're moving lead product behind the building. Once it's processed, it gets melted. We looked at the monitoring data, not from our own monitor. We're looking at their monitor, and it's not a 3-month rolling average is what we're citing in there. What we looked at was essentially the baghouse parameters and correlated it to that event, and then used their monitoring data, and made the connection and said this event led to we couldn't call it an axe exceedance because it was like a 1-day deal or a 15-minute deal. And that's how we approached
But
it.
it was 24 times the
Exactly.
legal 0.15 limits.
It was,
And
but
were we notified about it? Was anyone in the public notified about it? I don't think so.
you weren't.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Why?
And then how about the overall penalty? 3 years, 17 violations, the penalty's $11,000? That's meaningless, and there's no restrictions.
Why weren't we notified?
Guys, just a reminder, if we have one person speaking, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
The penalty is frustrating. There is that process that Courtney had alluded to that we follow. We're looking at deviation from compliance, potential for harm, obviously with lead, high potential for harm. Unfortunately, the agency also has constraint on maximum penalty amounts. But based on the facts of the case in that situation, and there were a lot of violations, but over a given period of time, over the 3 years, and we're looking at all the data that they're required to submit to us, it's frustrating, and I hear that.
Yeah, it's meaningless.
It's frustrating for us that as soon as we close the December enforcement action out, we hear from our monitoring folks, there's yet another event.
How is it gonna be different this time?
Yeah.
The open
Shut up
investigation.
We hear you guys, we hear you, for sure. One of the questions that the gentleman had asked was how would it be different this time? And I know maybe we can't go too deep into that because it's open, but if there's anything we can answer there.
The enforcement tool that will be used this time will not be the same as that tool that you're alluding to.
All right. Right, we can, I think, go on to the next question.
My name is Chad Alexander. I live in Burroughs Park, and I want to talk about the history of Gopher because we kind of looked. I mean, this came to me out of the blue like everybody else. But what happened earlier this year is, I say, Chapter 75. This place has been here for 75 years. All right. Well, my first question is, I'm looking at your October 2009 technical support document, Figure 4, and it shows it is a model of maximum monthly average lead concentration contours for GRCF 2009. And what it shows, we talk about the steep gradient where the lead comes out of the stack, right? It drops closer to the stack. But right next to that stack is the intersection of Dodd and Yankee Doodle. And what your own model shows in 2009, it's like 0.6. 0.6, right in that intersection. Let's talk about the concept of re-entrainment. Because that lead comes down, those cars go through, it goes back up, right? We all understand what reentrainment is. That shit falls, it comes right back up. And my kid's school bus goes through there every day, twice a day, just like everybody else in that neighborhood. So I'd like some answers on what is the MPCA doing about that intersection? Ironically, and sadly, we don't have scrubbers and sweepers cleaning up the lead on that road, on that intersection. You know who does do that? In your own documents, you talk about it, because the Gopher Resources remediation effort document is appended to that tech support document. They wet down and sweep their own roadways to get the lead off them in their facility. I implore everybody to take a look. I think this is on the MPCA website. Look at what's happening in that intersection. Okay?
So, sir, was your question what?
I'll get there.
Okay. Just.
I didn't get a lecture. This is from pages 13 and 14 of this technical support document signed by Gordon Anderson of MPCA. A special concern for the NAAQS is bare, unvegetated surface soils where lead particles may be re-entrained by the wind. Particles deposited or redeposited on the streets, Dotton Road and Yankee Doodle Road, and could also be re-entrained by traffic. This would present a public health hazard to residents in the vicinity. These particles can also be collected by filter and a lead TSB monitor. I mean, the MPCA understands what's happening in that intersection is a public health hazard. I've never heard anything about it until I stumbled across this long, boring document. Okay, so was the public notified about what's going on in this intersection, and when's the last time that intersection hasn't been studied? Another thing, the trailer incident that gentleman just brought up, GRS2 picked up the 24-time limit or exceedance, and that's the monitor right next to the soccer fields. And all that lead's not magically falling on a filter. It's falling on the soccer fields. That's GRS2 monitor. You can see it's on the north end of the property. There's a bunch of lead emission. And also go on the MPCA's website, look up the December 2, 2024 administrative penalty order documents, which I think Corey just alluded to. That was like less than a month before the next crap show started. Okay? So Gopher's not learning anything. They were put in non-attainment status in 1992. Do we know that? Right? They were redesignated in attainment status in 1994, 22 months later. So I don't understand why they can get out of it in 22 months then, but not now. That's another thing. I'm going to close with, and this expounds a little bit on exactly what happened on October 2 and October 8 of 2022. The APO that I've alluded to from December 2, 2024, vaguely gets into it, but here's what happened. And there's alarms that Gopher has in their system, in their facility, and they've been penalized over and over and over. They're supposed to respond in 30 minutes. Sometimes it takes a day to contact the MPCA, so you're fighting with your hands tied behind your back, and we get it. I get it. I sue asbestos companies all the time, and these corporations run roughshod over regulatory agencies. That's what they do, and they know how to keep what's happening here. On October 2, 2022, and they got fined for this, not just by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, this is the EPA. Now, the EPA essentially brought an administrative suit against Gopher. Here's what happened from the release on October 2. Something about the bag house, right? How much lead was released? 70 pounds. Just from one failure, 70 pounds of lead into the air. The other incident on October 8th, 2022. I mean, have you strung together the timeline of their lead problems on that site that they're sweeping up, but not our streets? that are right next to it, another 17 pounds of lead in the air. So while these may not need to be reported under your standards, I want to be clear that Gopher Resources, from the beginning, has been polluting this neighborhood. And it's going to keep happening. And all MPCA can do, while it's underfunded and understaffed, is respond. And respond. I read a report that the Gopher Resource Corporation just received a new line of credit of $450 million. Do you know what I would do if somebody fined me $8,000 when I'm sitting on that cash? Nothing. I keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I didn't have a question.
Thank you, we'll move on to the next question.
Well, they can hopefully for some granddaughters. I don't know. I am Martha Davis. I am the parent of the woman who spoke earlier about the two immunocompromised autoimmune disease granddaughters. What she did not tell you is how angry we are. Because those girls spent months dying. And the doctors had no clue what the hell was going on. Now, I understand you have your regulatories, I understand all of that, but there's a human component here that is not being responded to. And we have to figure this out. My daughter is filing bankruptcy because she couldn't work. The father ran off because it was too much for him. And here we are trying to save these girls' lives. And I don't know if they're ever going to be okay, ever, because the damage was significant. Now, my question is significant, because we've talked about the lead, and the lead is awful. But my daughter has done a lot of research since this information came out, and she has found out that they now use something that's never been used before. They're using some system of gases to try and eliminate some of the lead. She has researched every one of these gases that are being used. None of them are compatible with human life. Are those monitors monitoring the gases? Are they monitoring these other things that are in the air? That's my question.
So your question is, just to try to make it something that we could probably answer, what exactly are the monitors monitoring for?
Yes.
Okay. Is that something? Might be on mute.
Can you hear me? So our monitor at that site tests for lead, total suspended particles, and then 9 other methods. And so I'm not quite sure if we look at kind of cross-reference the gases that you're concerned about to the list of metals that we are monitoring for at that site. And I may have the list that I could read off here in my notes, but
the gases are being monitored also, or no?
9 metals plus lead and total suspended particles are being monitored at our site. And that data is available.
They're not even monitoring the gases. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, she's
monitoring.
Just real quick, I'll help clarify some. Can you just very briefly explain, not everyone knows what TSP or total suspended particles are. I think there's a little bit of confusion on if that is the gases that they're referencing or not.
Those are particles. And so I don't know, so we don't have a gas monitor there. We have lead, they're monitoring particles there.
Particles of what?
Yeah. Well, I may need to call on some assistance, but let me just pull up my notes, see if I can pull up my.
So the gases that they're using to try to eliminate some of the lead is being monitored if you're talking about particles. Is that what I am hearing?
Correct.
Because none of the gases they use, you'll realize, are compatible with human life. My daughter, she had to leave because she has to go take care of her very sick girls. She had to leave. She has a list and she's been going through it. And none of them, they're all killers of human beings.
I'm going to defer to my colleagues, but I think it would be helpful if we could have some follow-up and get a little bit more information about the gases that you're referring to, but
One was something about 1,3-butylene or something. Do you have it? She's got the list right here. Okay.
That's my question.
All right, so I heard
I think we're going to
the
have to follow up on that
We'll
question.
follow up on the gases and learn more, so maybe future meeting or we'll see.
I guess I'll just add, so my name is Allie Franke. My question was very similar. There's been a lot of focus on the lead. But Gopher Resource is the #1 emitter of carbon disulfide of 1,3-butadiene. They're the #3 emitter in the state of methyl chloride, and they're #5 emitter of lead, and then they're #6 of acetopha. I'm not a scientist.
You're doing great.
Right. They're #7 of diacetyl phthalate, and #8 of sulfur dioxide. I know myself, I have smelled a sweet kind of metallic-y sulfur smell in the air, and I have called the MPCA about it numerous times. The main line never ever has an answer. I've called the emergency line, and I get referred to somebody that kind of changes. And then I'm told that it's being passed along to other agencies and that I will receive a follow-up. I called 4 times during 1 week in September as a teacher who had just gone back to school and a mom of a toddler. It's a very time-consuming process to call the MPCA. It's very frustrating when you're passed along and put on hold and blah, blah, blah. I asked for a callback and never got a callback about the smell in the air. And so it can feel really frustrating to then a few months later receive notice that there's lead in the air, and then when I asked at the open house, they were like, well, you're actually probably not smelling the lead, but it might be actually one of these other really toxic chemicals in the air. So it just makes me wonder, and I don't really know what the question is, but I feel like every time I ask somebody, they're like, well, call the MPCA. But I have, and nothing happens, so. That's
I'll start out and try to address the frustration with the complaints and logging complaints. I'll be the first to admit we need to do better on how we track our complaints, follow up on them. We are working on that process right now. It's like anything else. It takes a lot longer than what I want and what you all want. Hear you loud and clear. I'll be the first to admit it. In terms of the emissions, and I'm guessing you're speaking about emissions inventory data. Is that where you pulled
Yeah.
that from? The question related on that, I guess I wanted to get to the complaint line first. I might not be the best to answer that. Sure.
So I think some of the items that you're listing, those are from our emissions inventory. Facilities in Minnesota have to report emissions to us. And so many of them are what we call air toxics. Actually, up until recently, we haven't, at the state level, haven't had authority to regulate air toxics. In the 24 legislative session, the legislature gave us that authority, and we're in the process of developing regulations to regulate those, as well as actually currently in the state, we have the authority to require facilities to report air toxics to us. It was a voluntary process, and so we also have that authority. And so we are developing those rules, and so unfortunately we've been pretty limited in what we can do about that type type of pollutants, but we are getting that, we have that authority, and we're developing those rules. And as everything, it's taking long, it takes a while, because it's a very technical process, but we are actively working on that right now, and we're really excited about that as an opportunity going forward to regulate those pollutants.
But can I just follow up? I'm just curious because a lot of them are known carcinogens, and like we're talking about people who have cancer right now, and so like I definitely fear that it takes time. But like, is this being considered in an evaluation, like in your evaluation of like whether to hold their permit? Like, are you considering like things beyond lead that are like really toxic to our neighbors and our children?
Just to round out that question, the question is, outside of just the lead and the violations that occur with lead, are we looking at it kind of holistically with other violations there might be?
Just in general though, you talked about the enforcement and that. If we don't have a regulation, we can enforce and compliance enforcement can't move forward. And that's what Amanda's talking about, is building that base. Having reporting, having limits developed that then we can build into our permits and then we can enforce. Without that, we do not have power to act. And I think that was what your question is, for those specific items that are not federal or state regulations are existing. It isn't, not a, so I think it's a very frustrating piece. It is noted that's why we're happy about this rulemaking and move forward.
And just to, if this is correct, I sometimes try to translate it to layman's terms from very smart people on the stage. What you're saying is, would it be correct to say that the PCA is looking at enforcement with Gopher in all of the ways we have regulatory authority to do currently? To your point about the air toxics, those words I can't pronounce, you did better than I did. We don't have the authority yet to do that, but we are in the process of writing the rules to do it.
All right, so we only have a few more minutes left. We do have the room until 8:30, but the MPCA has to get going. So
We're happy
we'd
to
like to
stay.
make this the lightning round. So
We're happy to stay 10 minutes over. We can push that.
Yep. So if we can do quick questions so we can get through everyone's questions before we close out the evening.
Hi, I'm Julie Murphy. I live in Gopher Oaks neighborhood. My husband and I have been there 23 years. We have highly elevated levels of lead, and we have a myriad of health concerns between us. So my question to you is, knowing what you know and the things that you don't know as well, would each of you feel safe moving into any of our homes? Would you be willing to live in our neighborhood? Would you recommend that your family members move into our neighborhood?
And those are questions I think everyone has mentioned. People do the research into it. It's something I did buying a house that's one neighborhood over. I'm not in Burr Oaks, but I do live in Timber Grove Heights, just across the 55. That is a personal question. Like, what we can say is what we can do, what we have the regulatory authority to control through our permitting and enforcement mechanisms, and we will continue to do that work as we move forward. And then health is a great resource too for individual questions about health issues that people may be experiencing, or how to get data on things such as lead and then those conversations we can continue to have for it. So that is a very individualized question.
And real quick, it sounds like the city got testing results back on Dresser Park, et cetera. So breaking news here.
Lightning round.
I was just wondering if when the federal EPA dropped its lead exposure numbers to zero, or when it eliminates the process of looking for lead, will the state EPA be able to follow recommendations of their own. Or if the federal government says we don't care about lead exposure, then you're done with it too.
Good question. We'll answer that, and then I will pass it over to the city to share those test results.
So I think the question is, because EPA sets standards for lead and other pollutants, and if EPA were to drop that to 0, would we comply with it? Is that the question?
Not drop it to 0, but just eliminate. Say it's not a problem. We don't care how much lead is in it. It's part of the federal EPA.
I see.
Would you still be able to say, well, we care?
Thank you for that clarification. Yes, so we, in our state rules, we have also adopted these standards into our own state rules, and those would still be enforceable, yes.
All right, we will pass it over to the city here to share the results that they received from soil testing at Thresher Park and other green spaces.
Hi, Sarah again. It seems a little ironic, I guess, that I got this email at 7:48, and I think I answered this question first at like 7:40. So I just got an email at 7:48 saying that those 3 areas that we talked about, the Thresher Off-Leash Dog Park, Burr Oaks Park, and Thresher Fields, all those soil tests came back well under the EPA's limit. So just wanted to report that while I have that information fresh.
What was it? Gotta love how your phone loses it as soon as you want.
I will pull that back up, but also we will post that tomorrow morning on our website. So if you want to check back, if I don't get that pulled up right away, I'll post those results in the morning on the website.
Thank you. All right, next question.
Hi, can everyone hear me? My name is Morgan. I'm also a resident. First off, I just really wanted to thank Dave, who's disappeared here, but he paid $300 out of his own pocket to fund to have MPCA as well as our own community center that we had to pay for this community event. So I just really wanted to get a round of applause. And that's maybe almost a reflection, right, of how hard we're going to have to work to make sure there is action. Second point, I really want some more information about the flyers and how you decided who to notify and when, specifically with regards to the amount of daycares and schools within the area. So that's my first question. My second question is also being proactive. We know this is harmful to pregnant women, nursing mothers, which you didn't mention, as well as children. And so if that's a known exposure to community, we should be proactive. Monitoring at 1 and 2 is probably not enough for our children. So we could be proactive. Every pregnant woman and nursing woman should get her lead monitored in the city. And so people should be aware of that. So I'd understand why you wouldn't take that proactive approach. And also, why can't we have HEPA filters for every single family in this community that is impacted with the resources? So there is some proactive monitoring and information you can say other than just avoidance. And this is the 21st century, so we can be proactive and say, hey, you need to wash your hands, wash drugs. There's also chelation therapy and natural options that are not mentioned, like taking calcium, magnesium, so things that we could be proactive about and making people feel. And then those are my top questions, so thank you.
So the question I heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is about how the PCA decided who to notify and when. Is that correct?
It goes beyond 1 mile. I mean, there's other communities like El Paso, Texas, that went up to 20 miles. So not everyone is aware of what the exposure is. So some people think they're not affected, and I think we should go more robust than
Okay. So that's both a question and I think sharing feedback, for sure. And that's her.
Because my understanding is the original shaded area on your map was expanded at some point
because I got a very late notice and I was outside of that shaded area, but within a reasonable amount of space. So if you did adjust that space, what made you do that? What was the reason?
Yeah, thank you very much. So it sounds, I appreciate your feedback, and it sounds like you might know the answer to the question that you asked about how did we decide who to send the flyers and do a mailing to this, in addition to all the social media and we have a website and the virtual options that we have available to us. Well, as you saw on the map, which hasn't changed since we started our communication, really draws sort of an oblong shape of about 3/4 of a mile radius around Gopher Resource. We knew obviously that the area of interest was greater than that area of impact. And so we doubled it by saying we're going to go 2-mile radius in terms of our direct mailing notification.
Based on you thought people would be interested, or is there scientific evidence that it can travel?
Purely based on interest.
Right, we're gonna-
Impact is this tape that you saw on the screen. And then
Yeah, the second, sorry, to the second part of your comment about additional resources being crafted. Yeah, you're absolutely right on calcium and iron is another item that is protective in the diet when it comes to lead specifically. On our website, we do have some resources on foods that contribute to a healthy diet and like specific reference to lead. And we're, like I said, it's on our website, but we're happy to make sure that goes out to the community group. And that's something that we share with families that we're working with when we do health education. One thing that I do want to caution on is that we do have some specific resources about chelation therapy. This is something that gets brought up when we're talking about lead. And chelation therapy, for those that don't know, is basically a drug that binds lead in the bloodstream and helps the body eliminate it faster. The problem with that is that none of those drugs are specific to lead. They also pull metals that you need, like iron and calcium, out of your bloodstream. And so the medical toxicologists that we work with don't recommend even considering chelation therapy unless there is a blood lead level above 45 micrograms per deciliter, at which point typically someone would be hospitalized. That's what I said earlier, typically there's like 2 to 3 people in the state per year, perhaps where that would be recommended. So I wanted to make sure to put that out there, that we are concerned about the cost benefit, or the benefit harm, some of those other things that are out there. But as far as diet, absolutely, iron and calcium especially are great to include in a healthy diet as a preventative resource.
Thank you. And we are at 8:10, but we're here to try to answer as many questions as we can. So we want to
Final two questions.
Yes, we have 2 more questions here that we can answer, and then we'll have to head out. And thank you for having us again today.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't expect to answer for the sake of time. I want to say I've been in Borough Hills for 30 years, and I want to say I'm an advanced practice nurse, and I want to say I'm an oncology nurse. And I want to say that I've raised 3 children, and I love this neighborhood, and I love Eagan. I want to thank my neighbors, because I've learned a ton a lot, and I don't know what it's called. The next time I walk around the corner of Dodd and Yankee Doodle, I'm going to think about what I'm walking through with my shoes, because I walk around that corner with my dogs and my husband and my kids all the time. I've been doing it for 30 years. So, City of Eagan, please also help us as well as MPCA. I will tell you, we're going to have more batteries because we have more electric cars and more electric lawnmowers and more electric whatever, and we do have to dispose of them safely. And what is our problem could be somebody else's problem. So one thing for the City of Eagan, and the MPCA has a piece of this too, why are we bringing in high-density housing into our neighborhood while we have a problem with Gopher State? And I want to thank the people I'm about prevention, right? I really don't like taking care of cancer patients, and I feel for the guy with multiple myeloma. Oh my God. Maybe, but life doesn't always just cause multiple myeloma, it is the other things too. So I want to tell you thank you for thinking of me. I want to thank my neighbors. I've learned a ton. I want to thank you guys. This is such a better format and more productive.
Yes, thank
And I just want to say thank you. And how do we protect ourselves? And I want to say, caution, you're exactly right about chelation therapy and those things, but guys, you don't just want to go taking calcium and iron every day because people have other health problems and you can get yourself really sick. You need to be under the care of a doctor or a practice provider. And you want to have medical care where you're testing your blood and then you have a conversation with a healthcare professional who can guide you safely, because to just take stuff can make you really sick. And I want to just thank you all.
Hi, I'm Helen Lockwood, and I live in Eagan. I'm probably in that three-quarter to a mile away from our Gopher Resources, and some of us are in the neighborhood or here today. The question is that you guys talked about making some changes as reflective of this community coming together and sharing what insights are good. Not just insights, but actually evidence. And we want to know, I'm a former project manager, so I'd like to find out when you might have updates, when you might have those rules redefined. When will you have progress in 3 months? And when can you tell us where you're at even a month from now? I mean, we're all looking for change, and you're saying you're doing things to make the change and that we're supposed to have a patience, but how long should we expect? That's my question.
Yeah, just to clarify, first question was how long until we get another update? There's a second question there kind of with the rulemaking that we were talking about with air toxics, and they're not, this enforcement case, and I'm not gonna answer the actual question, but I just wanna clarify the difference in the questions. This enforcement case is completely separate from rulemaking. Rulemaking is a process we go to establish regulations as the MPCA. So we can answer both questions, but I just wanna be clear about the differences there. So I can pass it over to someone who can answer this question, or those questions, I should say.
Well, I will start with rulemaking. I believe we are statutorily obligated to complete rulemaking within 36 months of starting it, and we got that to publish the draft rules. Thank you. Okay, so we would publish the draft rules at approximately June of 2026, May of 2026. Okay, I thought I knew it, but May of 2026, you would see draft rules from the agency regarding air toxics, which is one of the questions we had tonight. In terms of the enforcement timeline, I will tell you, I've already, I think, said that we're being thoughtful, we're being very intentional. We have included the EPA in terms of getting their feedback and their insights on our enforcement case, and as a result, that does take time. And so I hate to speculate because I certainly wouldn't want to rush something that I know you all care very much about. And then finally, I'll pass it over here.
Yeah, so our website will be continuing to provide information. These questions that we get here tonight are very helpful. We were working on some FAQs that are going up on that website. We will share additional information through some of the mechanisms we talked about. And there are a few folks that had helped set this up. We'll talk to them too about how we can share information with them also to the wider community.
All right, so that is our time. I just want to thank all of you for coming and sharing your stories, asking your questions. The one thing is that clearly this isn't over, and